Okay, for our last real activity that we're going to do with density, we're going to do this density investigation. Make sure you watch the entire video and follow the instructions that I tell you in the video. You can pause the video as much as you need to collect data. And then afterwards, there's a post quiz in this assignment. Okay, so just a reminder, density is a characteristic property of matter, which means it's specific to a substance. It's kind of like our DNA, and so therefore it can be used to identify unknowns. So your goal is to identify the unknown metals that I found in my classroom. So when I moved into this classroom, the teacher before me had been here for like 30 years. There's so much junk in here. It was unbelievable. And I'm still going through stuff and trying to figure out what stuff is that's in that back closet. So I did find a whole bunch of these metal samples, and I have tons of them, and I've used them a little bit, but I've never really tried to identify them. So I thought it might be kind of fun to try to figure out what these metals are and see if we can do that based on their density. So what I did was I collected some data on them and did some calculations. I'm going to see if you guys can back me up and verify my data. So your goal, or your instructions here, are to collect and record the data, record it in the data table, make sure you calculate the average density at the end. So you're going to end up with 2 or 3 densities for each metal sample, and you want to calculate the average. And then I have a list of known densities of metals. I'm going to see if we can compare them against that and hopefully identify the metals. And of course, again, you're going to take the post quiz after this. So what I want you to do first, and that kind of covers it. It might go away though. What I want you to do first is to copy this data table into your notebook. You can pause the video as long as you need. Sorry about the weird text in the boxes. I was trying to fit everything in there. So try to draw it as close as you can to what this looks like. You do need all these spots, and if you're just scratching them down on paper, you're going to be disorganized. So go ahead and pause the video and then come back and start it again. Okay, so what I have here is, actually I'm going to go back to this one. I have 4 different, I'm pretty sure are 4 different metals. And some of them I have two metal A and B, I have 3 samples of them that I think are the same, and metal C and D I only have 2. So do note that down here you're only going to have, these are going to be blank for metal C and D. And so what I've done is I've collected some data, mass and volume data, and I've included pictures so that you can kind of gather the data with me. And then you're going to record the data into this data box. So the first one here, if I show you, I had metal sample A, and I found the mass, and then the mass is 49.4 grams. And so you're going to go back, and under metal A, sample 1, you're going to put 49.4 grams here. Then I was finding the volume using the displacement method, since they are fairly regular shapes, but I wanted to be sure. And so in this case, for metal A, sample 1, I started off with, if you can look here, 13 milliliters of water. 13 milliliters of water. So you might want to jot that down. And then after I put the metal in it, the metal rose up to, that's 19, so 19.2, 19.4. So 13 minus 19 or the other way around, 19.4 minus 13 is 6.4. So you're going to go ahead and go back to your volume here and put 6.4, and then you're going to calculate your density. And of course, you'll want to use your notes to figure out how to calculate density there. And then you're just going to move on to the next one. So here I have metal A. So this is the same type of metal, but it's a different sample. I had a smaller sample of what I think is the same metal. And you're going to go ahead and record the mass. Take your time to do that. If you need to pause the video at any time, please do. Then I placed the metal into a graduated cylinder. So here was my starting volume. Then I measured, or I placed it in the water, and here is the volume after. Make sure you go ahead and record those in your data table. Now here's sample 3 of that same metal, so metal A, sample 3, and here is the mass. Here is the volume of the water before I added the metal. And here is the volume after I added the metal. Don't be alarmed if some of them are the same. I do have some of the things that are the same size, so you're going to get some of the same volumes. Here is metal B, a different metal, and its mass. This is sample 1. Here's metal B's volume of water before the metal was added. I know it's a little blurry. That's a 15 there. Switched up. The one piece wasn't big. It was too big to fit in that other graduated cylinder. And here is the after, so that's with the metal in it. Here's metal B, sample 2, its mass. Metal B, sample 2, here's the volume of the water before I added the metal. And after. And the last sample of metal B, here is the mass. Here is the volume of the water before I added the metal. And here is the volume after. So you should have 3 sets of data for metal B now. We're going to move on to metal C. Here's the first sample of 2 and its mass. Here is metal C, sample 1, that's the volume of the water before I put the metal in it. And the volume after. Here's sample 2, metal C, sample 2, that's its mass. Here is the volume of the water before I added the metal, so you'll have to do some subtracting because here is after. And then finally, here's, what the heck is that? Don't know what that is. Here's metal D, sample 1. This is the 4th and final metal. Here is the volume of water before I added the metal. And the volume of water after. And the last sample, metal D, sample 2. Here is the mass. This is the water before I added. And this is the water after. Okay, so you should at this point have a complete data table. You may need to take a few minutes and calculate your densities, calculate your averages, and then come back, because the next slide shows you some common metals and their densities. So I'm going to see if we can compare our average densities to these metals and identify my 4 mystery metals. And hopefully you get the same thing I did. Once you're done with this and you have a full data table, you're going to take the quiz where you're going to put your answers. Good luck.